Now I'm going to read our Bible reading this morning, which is taken from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, and verses 7 to 12. Again I saw something meaningless under the sun. There was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil, yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. For whom am I toiling, he asked, and why am I depriving myself of enjoyment? This too is meaningless, a miserable business. Two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labour. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if two lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. May God bless to us that reading from his words and inspire us as we think upon it and apply it to our own lives. It's not very often we have a reading from Ecclesiastes. In all the years I've been preaching, it's only the second time I've ever preached on a passage from Ecclesiastes. And I chose it this time, even though it's not a book I often turn to. If you are familiar with it, you'll know it's not the most cheerful book in the Bible. It's quite downbeat, quite sceptical, quite world-weary. It's a book written by someone with a lot of time on his hands. And he spends that time looking at life slowly and thinking, what's the point of it all? And it may be, after all these months, when many people have had a lot more time on their hands, maybe some of them have spent that time wondering what life's all about. What would make it more meaningful? I hope we're ready to help them ponder that further, help them find where life is and life in all its fullness. We have an online alpha course running now. And I hope we're always ready to talk with people about the hope we have in us. But today, I'm focusing on the issue in this passage from Ecclesiastes chapter 4, because it speaks to one of the biggest problems of this COVID season. Maybe the biggest problem with spending so long in lockdown. And that's loneliness. People haven't seen family members for months. Still not allowed to in many cases. People in care homes can't have any visitors at all. And people who are shielding haven't left their homes for ages. Here in Leicester, they're still advised not to. At least people who live alone are allowed to form a bubble just with one other household. Otherwise, they could be stuck entirely on their own. And like it says early on in Genesis, it's not good for people to be alone. We are not made to be alone. I saw a man all alone, said our reading from Ecclesiastes, then told us some of the reasons why that's not good. Two are better than one, it said. If one falls down, his friend can help him up. But pity the one who falls and has no one to help them. The COVID pandemic has left many more people needing help. Vulnerable people, confined to their homes. And for me, the most encouraging thing in the last few months has been seeing people get together to help each other. Hundreds of thousands signed up to volunteer. Local groups sprung up everywhere to hand out food parcels and so on. And I think sometimes people thought about a neighbour they usually didn't think about much, but realised they're going to be on their own. How am I going to help? We all need someone to pick us up if we fall. We need people to help us. And we also need people to protect us. That's another thing this passage says. In verse 12. Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. That sounds like defending themselves from being attacked, but I'm going to take it more generally as keeping each other safe. Because one thing COVID-19 has done, it's messed with our ideas of what protecting people involves. Because normally, you want to protect someone by staying close to them. Now, you protect them by keeping further away. Sometimes you just want to give someone a hug. Normally that would be the supportive thing to do. But now, you have to keep a safe distance. That's the caring thing to do. It goes against some of our instincts of what it means to be protected. That's one of the hardest things at the moment. Trying to look out for each other in a way that sometimes goes against our natural instincts. And they are deeply felt instincts. They are the way God has made us to be. God made us to be together, to relate to each other. We are rarely happy if we can't. We often need people just for company, just to have someone around. Ecclesiastes says, it's no good being on your own because you need someone to help you and you need someone to protect you. And sometimes being alone is just too cold and lonely. If two lie down together, it says in verse 11, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Well, you could put the central heating on, but that's not the point, is it? What we need is someone who cares about us. Some kind of love and affection. The one time I've heard this passage preached on before was for a wedding. The image of a cord of 3 strands was used to tell us what a Christian marriage should be. Hopefully by the time I finish, you might see why that could be a good image of what a Christian marriage can be. But this passage isn't particularly about marriage, it's about relationships in general. It talks about having a friend. It talks about having a colleague to do a job with when you're working. And relationships with work colleagues have been really disrupted these last few months. The message of this passage is our lives don't work very well on our own. We are not meant to be alone. If you were here last week, you heard me talking with David about my day job as a mental health nurse. And I want to tell you now why I went into nursing in the first place. It was after I got to know a number of people with mental health issues. People who God seemed to lead in my direction somehow. And I started to see some of the problems they faced. And what struck me most was how isolated a lot of people were. How lonely they were. That's what made me want to go into mental health care, seeing too many people who didn't really have anyone to care about them. And the most important part of my job is what in nurse talk we call a therapeutic relationship. You see, the most important thing a mental health nurse can offer someone is just trying to get on well with people who may find it very difficult to form supportive relationships or to keep hold of such relationships. And as this passage in Ecclesiastes makes clear, relationships are a key part of what being human is all about. And up to now, I have just been talking on the human level, like the reading does. It tells us it's not good to be alone, that 2 are much better than 1. And then it ends by saying a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. All along it's been, you need 2 of you. 2 are better than 1. But then it ends with a cord of 3 strands. Now that's a kind of phrasing you quite often find in the Bible, particularly in the wisdom literature, books like Ecclesiastes and Proverbs. They will often say things like, there are 2 of these, there are 3. Or, for instance, Proverbs 30 verse 18. There are 3 things too amazing for me, 4 things I don't understand. It's a standard technique in Hebrew literature, and the gist of it is, I'm going to list all these things, but actually there's more than that. I'm going to tell you all about this, but actually, there's still more to be said. We've seen how people need each other, how important human relationships are. But there is still more to be said. People are made to be in relationship, but not just in relationship with other people. There is something more. And that something more is our relationship with God. That's the third strand we need. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. For a good relationship with God makes our other relationships stronger. A good relationship with God gives the love and care and protection we most deeply need. Once we've learned to look to each other for support, there is someone else we should look to beyond that. Through this time that has so often cut people off from people they care about, I'm sure lots of people have seen more than ever how important our relationships with each other are. And I hope we will continue to value each other more because of that. I hope too that people will see beyond that, to see another relationship with even more meaning. The third strand that makes us all stronger. Now, I want you to try to think of someone you know who you think might be lonely. It may be someone who's been particularly affected by the restrictions during this pandemic. But think of someone you know who may well be lonely. And then I want you to think of someone else you know who does not know God, and who you would long to see come into a living relationship with God through Christ. And then we'll just say a short prayer to offer them to God.